The Dassault Falcon 7X. This baby has gotten a bad reputation over the last year for being a buggy, unintuitive, overall piece of crap not worth the money. Well, if you're like me and spent the money anyway, you're stuck with this flying brick, so we might as well try and figure out a way to make this thing work regardless of the quirks and fly this bad boy. Word of warning, I'm not gonna pretend to be a Falcon 7X expert or even an expert pilot. I'm just someone who is patient enough to figure out where all the damn crap is that you need to really take off, cruise, and land the stupid thing. If you want to see competency, ask me to make a tutorial on the A320 or the Phenom 100. Anyway, moving on. Once you load into the plane, it starts cold and dark, which means that not a damn thing is turned on. To get this thing taxi ready, we need to flip a few switches. These big red knob things are the two batteries. Switch those on. Then turn on the galley and cabin masters, LH and RH masters, LH and RH isolation, and the bus tie. You'll notice by now that all of your screens have turned on, including the so-called Easy Flight Management Computer. Easy my ass. Right after that, we can turn on the APU, which is going to power the aircraft enough so we can start our engines a little later. Click the master button and the start-stop button once. Once the APU is on, you can get the pilot and windshield heating turned on by toggling these switches. A note for buttons in the Falcon: if the button has a light on top and below it and neither is on, that means it's set to automatic. We'll put this windshield heat to auto here. Next, we'll turn on the lights to get ready for taxi. Totally optional if you're not a super realistic pilot, which I almost am. Almost. Then turn on the emergency and passenger signs. Now that our passengers know to sit down and shut up, we have enough peace and quiet to configure this interesting FMC. Now, if you had a flight plan set up from FSX, it should be loaded automatically. If you didn't, or the FMC decided to glitch out, it will be blank like this. For simplicity's sake, we'll just enter a direct route to our destination. Press the weird tic-tac-toe button here and pull up the keyboard, since there's no easy way to view the keyboard and the FMC at the same time otherwise. And type in the identifier where you want to go. In our case, Dallas, Texas, which is KDFW. Once it's in there, hit the DTO button and confirm the waypoint. Next, we can configure the different stages of flight in the FMC. The FMC has different tabs indicating the different stages: General, Ascent, Cruise, and Descent and Landing. The last tab is General Flight Information, I think. The first tab is where we can set our cruise altitude and speed, for some reason. We're going to fly low at 18,000 feet because this is a very short flight. You can also see what fuel you'll be at when you land approximately on the last tab. On the Takeoff tab, you can configure a SID and a runway for departure. Something for you to know, if you input this after you set up your waypoints or loaded your flight plan, it will put all the waypoints in before your current ones. That means it will fly you out, and then make you do a 180 to come back to the airport because the airport was your first waypoint originally. Stupid, stupid FMC. The Takeoff Config subtab lets you put the runway condition and your weight, which should automatically be calculated. I like to have takeoff arms auto throttle checked, so that way the airplane automatically holds to the speed limit after takeoff. You can also change your flap settings here, but I prefer to take off with 1. When you hit complete, it takes that information and shows you the takeoff speeds and stats. You'll obviously want to know your rotate speed at least. Cruise tab is boring right now. It basically shows you stats during the flight. The Descent tab is important, but we'll wait to fill it out when we're approaching the airport. It has the same thing as takeoff though. You can put your predicted weight at landing and it will compute settings for it to control the aircraft for you. I'll be honest though, I've never gotten this thing to land itself. I've gotten a 90% there. You'll see soon enough. Feel free to take a look at the Auto Speeds tab. This shows you what speeds the aircraft will try to fly at different stages. I'm certain the secret to auto landing is somewhere in here too. In the top display, you can click the arrow at the top to get different views of your flight plan. The most useful one is Cross, but we'll need to use the Arrival tab to activate the approach phase later. Let's go ahead and switch on the engines. The process is pretty simple. For each engine, flip on the fuel flow switch, set the engine mode to start, wait for them to spin up, then turn on the respective generator for electricity. Once all three are online, you can untie the bus and turn off the APU. Now you can push back and begin to taxi to your runway of choice. Oh, don't forget to hit B on your keyboard to get the barometer set to the area. That's important. Now before you take off, make sure you hit the VNAV switch and the LNAV switch. the LNAV switch won't illuminate until the autopilot is on. VNAV controls your vertical movement, and LNAV controls your lateral movement. VNAV up-down, LNAV left-right. Set your flaps, set full throttle, and down the runway you go. Once we take off, we'll turn on the autopilot. You'll need to control the pitch of your aircraft until about 1,000 feet for the VNAV to kick in. This is some sort of feature, I'm told. Once it kicks in, you're good to go since we had auto throttle set to automatic. Once you pass 10,000 feet, you'll see the auto throttle automatically increase your speed above the 250 knot speed limit to your cruise speed. Once you approach your cruise altitude, the aircraft will chirp at you to let you know it's about to level off. Then you let the aircraft follow its waypoints until you're ready to descend. Now, again, I'm sure there's a better way to land this plane with the FMC, but the only way I have found is to do an ILS landing with you controlling the vertical descent. So, to set up the approach, here's what you need to do. First thing I do is open up the map and find the airport. I find a runway that seems to be a good fit for the direction I'm coming from. Since I'm flying from the south, I picked a runway pointed north, in this case runway 35 left. I picked 35 left because it was longer than 35 right. I jot down the ILS frequency and then go back to the cockpit. In the landing tab of the FMC, hit select at the bottom right and put the runway you chose. Then confirm an ILS approach. I'll then recalculate the landing config to make sure the aircraft has the data. The top display will flip to the arrival screen to show you the details of the approach. Now for the thing that took me way too long to find. Your primary display is also a touchscreen, so you can click on the menu at the bottom to get more options. Select radio and then go to the nav tab. Set nav 1 to the ILS frequency we wrote down. It's a little finicky. Then hit the swap button to make it the active frequency. Next you can open the menu again and hit the sense button. This shows you your current navigation mode. Once we get ILS connection to the airport, we'll switch this from GPS to nav so we can be lined up with the runway. Now, the airplane will supposedly start to descend itself, but I've had mixed results. So I just descend manually once we get closer to the airport. Once you're reasonably close to the airport, go to the arrivals page and click the ENT button under the flashing activate approach text. This then tells the aircraft to start moving in the direction for the approach we loaded. Continue to descend as needed, lowering airspeed as well. I occasionally have to use the speed brake here to keep my speed down. Once you're close enough to the runway, you'll see the ILS LOC lock in your main flight display. This means you have communication to the runway for approach. When you're reasonably close to the runway, click the arrow next to GPS and select nav to allow the aircraft to line up. Once on final approach, lower flaps to full and make sure your airspeed is reasonable. Once the glide slope indicator lines up with our main flight display as level, I turn off VNAV and take control of our approach manually. Now, I know what you're thinking. Just hit that app button. It's clearly the approach button. Yes, it clearly is, but when I push that, the aircraft decides to just turn around. No clue why. Once you're doing this, just keep your aircraft lined up as best you can with the glide slope level, and you're good to go. So let me show you what not to do while landing. For education purposes. Once I get close to the runway, I turn off the auto throttle so I can retard the thrust. Make sure you know where your throttle is when you do this, because otherwise you'll be a complete idiot and stall the aircraft about 100 feet above the runway. But hey, look how perfectly center I was on that landing. So hopefully this helps some people out there. Like this video if you liked it, dislike this video if you want me to crash land in a real plane. Leave a comment if you've got something more interesting to say. I'll catch you all later. Thanks for watching.